Multiclassing is a huge part of Baldur's Gate 3, from theory crafting to build making and just simply playing the game. Taking advantage of the blend of one class's abilities with another allows you to make some truly devastating combinations, such as the dreaded Bardodin or the all-powerful Tempest Sorcerer. In this video today, we're going to do a tier list off of the best melee multiclass options for BG3. I have another video planned for caster multiclass options, but this allows me to fairly judge the classes which might be skewed by other class options. Now, this was a little difficult to frame properly because I had originally planned on looking at all the subclasses and all sorts of situations, so before we get started, let me lay out some ground rules. We'll only be looking at these classes strictly as a dip into them as a multiclass. What I mean by that is a max of 4 levels. Anything beyond that sort of blurs the lines, and it's hard to rate individual multiclasses off of their merits because classes become stronger with each level. The focus here is to help you in deciding which multiclass options are strong in almost all cases, like the Thief, or only in particular hyper niche ones, like, say, Wizard. Lastly, this is all opinionated. Your tier list might be different, and this all comes from anecdotal experience. So if you see a class in a position that makes you doubt playing that one, don't do that. This is a single player narrative game. Have fun with it however the hell you want, and not in the way someone on the internet tells you to. If this is your first time on my channel, the way I do things is by uploading the knowledge of my videos, so you can find the complete tier list linked in the description below. From there, you can jump ahead to any of the chapters in the timeline and description to any of the specific tiers to find out my justification for certain multiclass options or what have you. But if you've taken a look at the list and that's all you wanted to know, please feel free to shut the video down and head on out. Before you head out, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. All those things do help me out in a huge way. I've gone from something like 89% to 80% unsubscribed viewership because of your help, but that's a number I'd still like to get lower, and every little bit helps. If you need help with any other subject in Baldur's Gate 3, check out my playlist linked below and at the end of the video. But let's get started here on my melee multiclass tier list for Baldur's Gate 3. Opening up our video, we're going to go right into the D tier. Now, keep in mind that everything on this list, S, A, B, C, D, nothing is an F, right? Nothing is completely unbroken. Don't play it. You're just going to have a bad time. Nothing like that. And remember too, we're only looking at anywhere from 1 to 4 levels depending upon what the situation is. And of course, we are looking strictly at melee classes. How do melee classes, either 8, 9, 10, 11 levels into a melee class, blend in with this class as its multi-class? That's a lot of classes. The first one is Sorcerer. And Sorcerer is at D tier here because it is a really good primary class. A level 10 Sorcerer with 2 levels into Tempest Cleric is disgustingly strong. But Sorcerer really wants to be a primary class. A Sorkadin is an even spread more often than not than Sorcerer and Paladin, or it's a 7-5 or a 5-7. It doesn't necessarily want to only have 4 levels into itself, or even for that matter 1, 2, or 3. And all the big benefits of all the subclasses, for the exception of wild magic, come at level 6, really, for the Sorcerer. So it exists here alone at D tier because I think, by and large, there's no real multi-class that can really stand on its own. Well, I'm sorry, that only 2 or 3 or 4 levels of this class don't really help out any of the melee classes in the way that any of the other ones on this list are going to. I mean, especially a Wizard, right? Wizard and Sorcerer, I originally had D, both at D tier, but I was like, you know what? You can get more out of a Wizard than you can a Sorcerer. So that's why it exists here on its own. And jumping up from there, we have our C tier, which actually just brings up the next spellcaster. It's a Wizard. Now, Wizard is interesting, right? Because it scales with intelligence. And we know that the way spellcasting modifiers work, it's the last new class you take. So this actually can be pretty beneficial depending upon what we go with our melee fighter. And it's, well, melee class, because fighter is a class. But it's worth noting here that Wizard is also pretty fun because you could just take 1 level into Wizard, and that unlocks Wizard spellcasting as a form of cheese, in that you can scribe any spell you want into a spellbook and then cast it. But that then gets into the issue that you need to take a class as a primary class that has spell slots to allow you to scale that out. So if you took a Paladin, sure, that allows you to have some spell slots, but you're a Paladin. You probably want to use those for smites. If you went ahead with, say, a Ranger, yeah, you could do that. You could have a little fun with it, but you have the wisdom of a Ranger. Now you have the strength and or dex of a Ranger, and now you conflict with the fact that you now have intelligence. So intelligence really mucks things up because it's the only class that uses intelligence for its primary stat, as it were, for the exception of our Eldritch Knight and our Arcane Trickster. And that's why it exists here at C, because it can augment both of those classes very well. And in fact, since the Eldritch Knight can be so strong with the addition of a wizard, it really stands to reason that it is a really good singular niche pick for the wizard as a multi-class option, because an Abjuration wizard is just stupid strong, because its Abjuration special subclass capability is it to allow it to mitigate damage, right? So you add the fact that the Eldritch Knight can pull spells from enchantment and from abjuration, and you have a really well-made class. I think the video I've done on this is an 8-4 split, if I remember correctly. So 8 levels into Eldritch Knight and 4 levels into Wizard makes for actually a very devastating class that has good spell slots, a ton of access to shield because it's an Eldritch Knight, and you have the abjuration capability. It just is a really, really, really good mix. It doesn't really jump into a lot of other classes as well, but it's still a very good one for the Eldritch Knight, which uses its intelligence. And the same thing here for Rogue and Arcane Trickster, jumping into intelligence, but now spicing in the fact that I can use a whole ton more spells because of that Wizard multiclass. Another one here that exists at the bottom is going to be the Druid. The Druid is fun, but it really wants to be a dedicated character, especially if we're looking at Spore Druid, which is the only one of the 3 I can really put into a stronger multi-class in the than say Land or Moon. Moon wants to really dedicate more levels to it because Moon allows me to get more shapeshifts, and those shapeshifts get more levels with higher levels into Moon Druid. So it's harder to multi-class with it. Same thing with Land Druid. A lot of my spell capabilities and fun stuff comes with more levels into Land Druid. Spore Druid, though, does allow me some fun mixing in. I can jump into my Halo of Spores and all the fun things with spores that give me temporary hit points, but it does scale off of my Druid level. And even then, the ability to summon things with Fungal Infestation starts at Spore Druid level 6. So I think that the Druid just needs too many level investments for it to be considered a really strong dip for a melee class. Now, that's not to say that it's not good altogether, right? I have got a video with it as a 6 and a 6. 6 into a Spore Druid, 6 into another class, and it's actually still quite strong. You can have a lot of fun with this, but it just needs more investment than just simply a 3 or a 4 levels. And on that same note too is the Monk. The Monk is really goddamn good. An open hand Monk as a primary melee class is really strong. But if you take a look at Monk as a multi-class, anywhere from that 1 to 4 levels, it's not as wild because you can use your key points, which are really fun. Those key points do replenish on a long rest and a short rest, unlike a lot of other multi-classes we'll talk about, which get that ability at like level 5. The key points also are going to be depend upon which subclass you take, right? So if you go with the 4 Elements Monk, you can use those key points for some minor spell casting, but you won't get access to a whole ton. And that's an issue, right? So you're jumping into a multi-class that now needs Wisdom as its primary capability when it comes to spell casting if you're looking at 4 elements. And if you're not already a ranger, well, that's going to be a little rough for you. Now you've got to focus on trying to put Wisdom into the class some way or another. Or if you're trying to get advantage of some of the bonus action stuff that you can get from an open hand Monk, well, the big issue there is that a lot of that is going to be relegated to unarmed combat. So if you wanted to say go with a unarmed fighter with a Monk, that could really work. But you run into an issue where a lot of the other big benefits of being any of the other classes as a primary class and mixing with Monk just kind of cancel each other out. So the Monk is really, really good as a primary, but I think as a minimal dip, it really struggles. In fact, we talked about that Spore Druid. Spore Druid and Monk is a really good combination, but both need a pretty heavy investment into each, 6 into both, and really makes for a stronger character. But this is our C class, and as you can see, it's still passable. It still has some good use cases and times where these classes will shine with very niche picks, but they don't overall benefit a lot of melee classes. But that actually brings us to our B for Barbarian. It didn't mean for that to happen, but here we are. And the Barbarian is really good because it can add a lot of fun to a Paladin. You can have a lot of fun with a Rogue. You can have a lot of fun with a lot of different abilities to add Enrage into your kit. But the thing that's kind of funky with that is that it also can kind of shut off some capabilities. You can't cast spells if you've Enraged. So all of your capabilities as, say, a cleric, like a war cleric in specific, if we're talking about melee, right? A war cleric, a paladin, even a ranger can't use their spells because of this. Or even if you're going like a Pact of the Blade warlock primarily and you want to jump into a barbarian, well, you know what? You're going to lose the ability to cast. But still, getting the ability to use all the many things that a barbarian can do is still quite strong. And if you're thinking about strictly a melee class, if you jump this into a fighter, even into a paladin, you can still have fun with this and do a lot of damage. You can cast all of your concentration spells before you enrage, and then once you enrage, you have a whole extra source of damage as a berserker. You're a berserker, and now you have a whole additional bonus action you can do damage with. If you went 9 levels into Rogue Thief and then 3 levels here into Berserker, you can go have a lot of fun, but you have 2 bonus actions that you can do even more damage with. And the nice thing too is if you jump 3 levels into Berserker and take Wild Heart Bear allows you to be resistant to all damage types with the exception of Psychic. That's a really strong capability that you're spicing into any other melee class, which already wants to be in melee as it is. So you get to have a lot of fun. And the fact that you can, as a paladin, smite while enraged, that's a really, really great capability that you can really go to town with. And even though it shuts off a lot of other capabilities, I think that being able to really have a lot of fun and punchy fun, especially in melee punchy fun as a barbarian that multiclasses out, allows you to do a lot of fun stuff because you're also not jumping into a ability that's far from what you're probably going to be focusing in, right? Constitution, strength, and or dex are what you're going to focus on as a barbarian. And it's probably going to be what you're focusing on if you're a fighter, if you're a paladin, or whatever it is. So this at least kind of plays along with the stats that you have in mind for your melee character. Now, moving into A tier, we're going to do things a little bit differently. I want you to think of the first thing that we talk about to be the strongest of the things in A tier, and the last thing we talk about to be the weakest or maybe the more niche pick, as it were. I've said that word like a million times, and I probably mispronounced it because it's me, but whatever. The first one is Paladin. Paladin is a very strong 2-level dip for casters, for melee, for everyone. One of the strongest characters in the game right now is a Bardadin with 2 levels into Paladin to unlock their spells and their smites, of course, and then 10 levels into a Sword Bard. It is one of the strongest ones. But because it's just a singularly really strong class doesn't mean it automatically jumps up to an S tier, because we have to look at its application across all the other classes that exist. And it's still pretty goddamn strong. Because you can take this and have a lot of fun and add a lot of smites into, again, Barbarian. If we went the opposite route, rather than saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to take just a couple levels into Barbarian, we could take a lot of levels into Barbarian and then a few levels into Paladin and turn the smites on with my primary focus of being an enraged Barbarian that uses a 2-handed weapon. So you can kind of think of these things as adding this layer of destructive flavor into the spell slots that are given to you from the Paladin. And even so, too, to take a look at the subclass options that we've got, if I want to go more support to my fighter, I can go ahead and just sprinkle in my Ancients Paladin. If I want to go with a light cleric and kind of be a tankier character by adding in some 4 or 3 levels of Paladin, I can do so. You can have a lot of fun by spicing in just enough Paladin to give you access to smites, really good capabilities with your, what the hell's it called? Your Channel Oath. That's it. That was a Channel Oath and limited lay on hands capabilities, but still, you can do a lot of fun stuff with Paladin. I think is really kind of stands out. And another big one too is Bard. Now we know Bard, of course, to be that Bardadin at that 10 levels into Bard, but even going the opposite route, sprinkling in just a little bit of Bard adds in a lot of power to both melee and casting classes, even though, of course, this is a melee focused video. Sword Bard adds so much to being able to use those flourishes to do a lot of damage, to give your AC bonuses, to hit more targets, push things around, to teleport to them. There's a lot of stuff you can do here. And what's nice too is when I say melee, I think I mean more martial, because I'm going to include in this anyone that would be using bow and arrow for the most part, because you can use these capabilities with those to either do the range version of those abilities or teleport to things, whatever you want to do. And I think though that the Bard doesn't jump to that S tier for me because I've limited the goalposts here, right? Because at level 5 with Bard, we get Bardic Inspiration, which allows us to replenish our bardic inspirations on what the hell is it called? A short rest. Since we don't get access to that, it makes it so it becomes a finite resource that we need to long rest to completely replenish, unless we use some of the items, and even then it's going to require that long rest to keep a lot of those abilities active. But I think as far as what the skills that are offered to Bard 2, if you go through like the lore Bard route or what have you, this punches in a lot of really fun behavior into the character. So I think Bard exists as a really strong choice here, as well as Ranger, because Gloomstalker is really good. Now, typically Gloomstalker, you'd want to go those 5 levels, but you can get a lot of really good benefit out of just simply going to the 3 levels into Ranger and getting access to Hunter or Gloomstalker. Beastmaster doesn't exist to me in this context as being a very strong single dip multi-class, because I think much like Circle of the Moon Druid, it needs more investment to get stronger beasts out. You really want to get to just a level 8 at the very least, 8 or 9, to get the increased hit points and their increased damage through your proficiency. You're not going to get that, so I think Beastmaster kind of falls out here. I mean, it can still be present. You can put a little bit of beast and get someone like a Raven and can do some crap, but Hunter's going to give us access to Colossus Slayer, which does a 1d8 additional damage to anything without max health, or we can do the ability to hit multiple targets as a hunter, or we can just simply do more damage to large creatures. So we get a little bit more damage profile added in with the hunter. And with Gloomstalker, we get some really fun capabilities outside of the extra attack we would get at level 5. We wanted to add that into a rogue, right? But still, I think that this exists as a very, very strong one, but not as strong as the other 2, which brings us to Cleric. Now, Cleric exists as a very strong multi-class for a really important reason. 2 levels into Tempest Cleric is one of the strongest things that you can put into a lot of different classes in this game. But more importantly, when it comes to melee, we're looking at War Cleric. War Cleric has its War Priest charge. I can basically weaponize and add an additional attack into my character on a bunch of characters that already get extra attacks. So this gives me a whole nother bit of damage that I can layer into my character, which is really awesome. And if I'm getting levels 3 into it or 4 into it, one or the other gives me Divine Strike, which I can add a +10 to my attack roll. I can actually connect with a target maybe that I've got great weapon mastery on, and I really want to hit a really strong hit into them. War Cleric exists as such a strong option. Light Cleric is really good too because of Warding Flare. I can take some levels of Light Cleric into my predominant Paladin character, and I'm a super tanky character that exists to just basically block all the shots that come my way. You can really spice a lot of fun stuff into this too. Unfortunately though, I don't think Cleric makes that jump to S tier because there's not as many subclasses that really thrive here, right? Life is another really good one. Just taking a couple levels into life and then maybe again going as like an Ancients Paladin makes it so I can be a really good healer. 9 levels of Ancients Paladin and 3 levels of that Cleric, I can tap into Warden of Vitality and get a bunch of benefits to all my heals because I'm that type of Cleric. But we're not taking the entire range of subclasses here, which eventually falls short because as we jump into stuff like the Nature Cleric, the Knowledge Cleric, a lot of the other ones that need heavier level investment, especially for a melee class, it just kind of falls off of its usefulness. That's why I think the Cleric of the A tiers is the weakest, just because there's 1 or 2 that really stand out amongst like what? There's 5 or 6 domains versus like a Paladin, which can be used almost across all of the melee classes very well. And now we come to the S tier. And unlike the A tier, the S tier, the ones that are up there are they're all going to be good. And that's of course going to start with the Fighter. And what I think is unique too about the Fighter, more so than any other class in this list, is that the base package of a Fighter, regardless of your subclass, is going to benefit every single character in the game if you wanted to do it. 2 levels of a Fighter into 10 levels of anything else is going to be strong because you get Action Surge. Like my good buddy Remortis says, Fighter is like bacon. It makes everything better. So you're just simply adding that Action Surge, that additional whole action into your character. It is just such a good boon. If you're adding into a melee character, you're getting an extra attack. You're getting basically 2 more attacks onto a target. It is such a good, strong ability. And especially with all the really strong abilities that exist in the action slot, we get a lot of good action economy out of just simply adding this one. In addition, we do get Healing Surge. Healing Surge is not going to be as huge as I recall. It scales off of the fighter levels and not the character level, which I could be wrong on. But even jumping into levels 3 of fighter, we can get a champion level, which is going to simply make it so that anytime I want to crit, I crit on a 19 or a 20. It reduces that number by 1, and that stacks with other items in the game. So I can add this into any other melee character, any other range character, and still have a lot of really strong power from just simply a champion. And that's on the rails, right? It's all passive benefits. I'm not really adding any active abilities aside from action surge and healing surge to the character. Is it healing surge? Healing mend my heals, whatever the level 1 ability is for fighter. What a great video this is, right? I'm missing everything. But 2, even Battle Master, adding all those battle maneuvers into the character is always really, really strong. Even now, you guys have really convinced me on an Eldritch Knight, spicing into Eldritch Knight, and basically taking the shield capability that Eldritch Knight adds into your character and making that as using your spell slots as a way to just turn shield on for your character. It's huge. And if you went with Eldritch Knight, you still get action surge, which I think of the 3 is probably the weakest. Eldritch Knight is probably the weakest when it comes to like application across multiple characters. But still, you get action surge, so it doesn't matter. It's always going to be goddamn good. And on that note, we have Rogue. Now, Rogue is unique in that we've talked about some of these other characters and said, hey, you know, this subclass just is not... this is the only one of the subclasses that stands out. Remember, we talked about the druid and how really it's just the spore druid, or even how the cleric exists at the end of the A tier because it doesn't have all of its subclasses that kick in. The thief stands on its own for simply adding a whole nother bonus action free of charge. It's just there. You put 3 levels into thief. It fits in with every single character in the game, makes them even stronger, just like the fighter. Because having access to a whole nother bonus action is, depending on what you are, okay, if you're a barbarian, that's a whole other attack. If you're any other class, it's a whole other potion you can use. It's a whole other simple bonus action. And having better action economy in this game is the key to defeating the strongest, hardest things in the game. Honor mode is trivialized by characters with high action economy, characters with multiple bonus actions or multiple primary actions. So it stands there right up on S. And another one too is going to be that Warlock. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Warlock doesn't feel as great anymore because of how things have changed with Honor mode, right? Honor mode, you cannot get the Pact of the Blade extra attack in conjunction with the extra attack from a melee class. They've removed that stacking. But they've actually kind of, in a way, made it better. You only need 3 levels into Warlock to now get Devil's Sight. So your melee character is never blinded. You can use the cantrip of Eldritch Blast, and you don't need to focus on Charisma if you don't want. You can have it actually just do the Repelling Blast portion of it. You can get Armor of Agathis. You can get Arms of Hadar. Is it Arms of Hadar? Yeah, Arms of Hadar. That's the one that explodes and necrotic damage around you. Those things are all going to be useful and applicable to you. And the best thing, too, is if you take Pact of the Blade, you can simply remove all of your points into strength, regardless of what you're taking, and just put them into dexterity, charisma, and constitution. And because Pact of the Blade makes it so that your spellcasting modifier, which is going to be charisma for this character, is what your damage type comes from. So if we've talked about how spellcasting modifiers turn off of the last new class you take, if I start with a paladin, well, spellcasting modifier is charisma anyway, and then switch to a warlock, I can wear heavy armor. I take 3 levels into Warlock. I have Devil's Sight. I have Armor of Agathis, which is cold reactive damage as well as temp hit points. And I get 2 spell slots that auto-replenish. And those spell slots can just be cheap smites that I replenish on a short rest. I don't know why I said auto-replenish. I meant short rest replenish. So I think Warlock exists here to be very strong, to give us that ability to have a lot of punching power that I can say, hey, you know what? I'm going to play a ranger, I'm going to go warlock, and I'm just going to make it so that my damage source comes from my charisma. Or same thing with a fighter or whatever it is. And I've got Devil's Sight now. All of Act 2 is now not as scary to me. And jumping into Act 3, where I deal with a lot of things that are going to really try to muck my vision, Gith Yankee, I don't have to deal with it as much because I have Devil's Sight. Even moreover, we haven't even talked about the Great Old One, which now when I crit strike things within a radius around me are possibly feared. Or I can go Archfey and get a fear or a charm. Or I can go into the Fiend and get temp hit points when I kill things. So I think that the Warlock, yeah, sure, we're not getting, if we're on honor mode, the best, the triple attack from the extra attack like we used to. but we still get a character that can really do a lot of really fun stuff off of their crit strikes or whatever it is with the subclasses we take outside of the base kit of the Warlock, which is already really goddamn good. So now that we have this whole tier list complete for, again, melee classes, what can we really glean from it? And I think it kind of stands to reason that anything that drastically changes or adds stuff to the class as a base portion of its kit really shines. And that's what we get with the S tier and a lot of the A tier items. When we jump into the subclasses is when we start to kind of lose that viability, right? In which we get towards the end of A tier throughout B, C, and D. And I think it also is taking a look at the play style of the character. A melee character, or for that matter, range, anyone who's doing the kind of martial damage versus strictly casting in some way, shape, or form. Using spell slots, I guess, might be a better way to put it. Well, that's not even a better way to put it at all. I'm stupid. But either way, it stands to reason, obviously, that a wizard and a sorcerer are going to be at the bottom, or they're going to have very simple, very specific use cases. And of course, obviously, a fighter and a rogue are going to be towards the top, which, to be fair, on the caster version of this tier list, those two slots will not change, because getting additional action economy, like I've said before, is just the strongest thing in a game that's based off of the action economy. And if you have 4 characters in your party, getting an additional, and you look at all 4 of those characters, right, on a base level, that's 4 actions and 4 bonus actions. And if you can add just a simple additional singular primary or bonus action to that mix, you already start to get more than a lot of your opponents that you're dealing with, right? So having that is just such a huge boon. And even too, the Warlock can be spiced into a lot of casting classes very well to just simply add an additional cantrip. So I think it stands to reason that looking at those 3 classes, you get a lot of punching power to a lot of different classes. And I think too, when you look at the intelligence or the intelligence of the wizard, it can kind of be the thing that pushes it away. So looking at these classes, hopefully this gives you a better idea of how to multi-class for one of your melee or martial characters for that matter. And, you know, don't look at this as Creed. If you look at the sorcerer and that's what you wanted to do, you wanted to take a couple levels for whatever reason, then fucking do it. I'm just some guy on the internet who gives a shit. Play your game however the hell you want. I will say too, though, if you have a suggestion for why you'd want one of these on a higher tier, go ahead and let me know. In the subclass video where I took a look at all of the subclasses for all of the classes, you guys, I had Eldritch Knight at D tier, and you guys had amazing comments about how you should be looking at the Eldritch Knight's spell slots in the same way that a Paladin looks at their spell slots. Paladins use their spell slots for smite, and Eldritch Knight uses their spell slots for shield. And that completely changed the way I looked at the character. There are definite ways that people play these characters that I haven't even conceived. So by all means, let it be known in the comment section below if you think that, you know what, dude, Monk is S tier, and here is exactly why. It's because of this, because of that. Whatever it is, let it be known. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one, and take care.